The river that flows two ways. On October 15, 1609, the Dutch flyboat, the Half Moon, set anchor in the River of the Mountains, east of the shores of the present Ulster County. Henry Hudson, an Englishman, the captain of the Half Moon, and his crew of 18 Dutch sailors in the employ of the Dutch East India Company, were in search of a northwest passage, a shortcut to the Orient. Although he was not able to find the shortcut, he was nevertheless enchanted with the river and its people. From 1609 to the present, the River of the Mountains, or as some indigenous people who settled along the river called it, the river that flows two ways, impacted the developing history and culture of the Europeans who followed after Hudson. The River of the Mountains, the river that flows two ways, was renamed after Hudson as an enduring testimony to the importance of his exploration. Hudson is thought to have sailed up to an area just south of the present city of Albany before he turned back. If he were able to have reached the origin of the river, he would have traveled 315 miles from the Atlantic. Swirling rapids once found in this stretch of the river have been tamed by the Troy Dam and its attendant lock, which allows boats to pass the dam to and from the upper reaches of the Hudson. The dam at Troy is the limits of the tidal flow, that is, the Hudson River is also an estuary. The tides of the Atlantic Ocean ebb and flow from the mouth of the Hudson at New York City to the dam at Troy. If one were to throw a stick in the Hudson at Troy, it would drift back and forth with the tides for about 120 days before reaching the sea at New York City. The tidal range is greatest at the Troy Dam. It is almost 4 feet there. Under normal conditions, the salt front, salt water from the Atlantic Ocean, reaches as far north as Newburgh. During droughts, the salt front may reach to Poughkeepsie, 75 miles from the mouth of the Hudson. The river continues well past Albany to its origins in Lake Tier of the Clouds, a small lake 4,322 feet up on the southwestern slope of Mount Marcy, the highest mountain in the Adirondack chain and in New York State. It starts out, as many rivers do, as not much more than a babbling brook. A stone can easily be thrown across it. Farther south, the river flows past the Catskill Mountains on its quest to reach the sea. It is in this region that 3 tributaries, the Rondout Creek, the Esopus Creek, and the Catskill Creek, enter the Hudson. At Kingston, the river flow has been measured to be 5,834,805 gallons a minute. The warm temperatures of spring result in a rapid melting of snow from its watershed, which encompasses 13,390 miles. The more than 75 tributaries of the river gorge the Hudson with runoff, carrying important minerals, plant, and animal detritus, floating nourishment to the many types of organisms that live in the river. At the top of the food chain in the river are over 200 species of fish, which include seahorses that are often found in New York Bay. Although the fishing industry was once an important contributor to the economy of the Hudson Valley, in more recent times it has waned, primarily due to river pollution. However, sport fishing is still a popular pastime. On any warm day during the year, many people travel to the river for a day of fishing. And out of the more than 200 species identified at one time or another inhabiting the river, some 50 species are most often caught. Nevertheless, it is not advised to consume Hudson River fish due to high levels of pollutants, which include PCBs. Birds offer another important pastime for people that enjoy identifying the many different types associated with the river. Ducks, Canada geese, cormorants, gulls, and herons are just a few of the many species of birds that live on or around the river or use the river as a migratory route to and from their winter and summer residences. Eroding forces of the Hudson River have gorged out a channel through the Hudson Highlands, which are part of the Appalachian Mountains. This is the only river of the many rivers that pass through the Appalachian Mountains from Georgia to Maine that has cut a sea level passage through the granite of this chain of mountains. The river is only 1,500 feet wide as it passes through the mountains and 200 feet deep. At this scenic area, the river exhibits characteristics that one associates with fjords, and in fact many geologists consider the Hudson to be one of the longest fjords in the world. Crow's Nest Mountain is the southernmost in this area, while Storm King Mountain is the northernmost sentinel of the Hudson Highlands. A little farther south on an S-shaped curve in the river, one finds the United States Military Academy at West Point. During the American Revolution, a huge chain was stretched across the river so as to prevent the British from sailing up the Hudson. President Thomas Jefferson signed the Act of Congress establishing the Military Academy at this particularly strategic location. It afforded a commanding view of the river, and the gun batteries at the point served as powerful deterrents. Today, the river presents opportunities for recreational boating, fishing, and in many areas, swimming. Hundreds of boats, motorized as well as sailboats, can be seen on the Hudson, especially on the warm summer weekends. And in the winter, one can sometimes see ice yachts, many of which are considered antiques. Some have been clocked traveling well over 50 miles an hour, and in fact the Icicle, an ice yacht owned by the Roosevelt family, was clocked at 100 miles an hour. The Icicle can be seen at the Maritime Museum. Industrial development along the river was driven by the needs of New York City. Building materials were especially in demand and were in great supply in the Hudson Valley. Some 16,000 years ago, during the last ice age, most of North America was covered by glaciers. The grinding of the glaciers pulverized bedrock to clay, which can still be found in deposits along the banks of the Hudson. Water from melting glaciers formed great lakes in the valley. Over the millennia, and as marine creatures inhabiting the lake died, their shells and bones formed limestone deposits. As a result of these geologic deposits, the area was rich in bluestone, clay, and cement, all of which were needed as building materials by the rapidly growing metropolitan area of New York. These materials and the shipping industry had a tremendous impact on the economy of the valley. Many of the building materials were shipped downriver by sloops, similar to the current Hudson River sloop Clearwater. The many forests along the river in the Catskills and Adirondack Mountains supported the shipbuilding industry and provided fuel in the early days. Tall white pine trees were especially favored for the mass of the many tall ships. In addition to shipbuilding and fuel, the lumber mills supplied pulp for the paper industry. The opening of the Delaware and Hudson Canal, which served to bring coal from Pennsylvania to Kingston and then down the river to New York City, further enhanced the shipping industry. But it was the opening of the Erie Canal in 1825 that opened up the Midwest through the Great Lakes, thus guaranteeing the successful growth of New York City as one of the leading ports of the world. With the arrival of railroads, the movement of materials by boat began to decline. The once plentiful side-wheeler steamboats were the workhorses of the economy during the 19th and early 20th centuries. The dayliners, stately boats, offered fast and comfortable passage to the many cities along the river and were common to the Hudson River for over 100 years. Famous boats such as the Mary Powell, the Alexander Hamilton, the Kingston, and the Albany are names of a few of the many that plied the river, providing much-needed transportation services to the valley. Today, one can still see ocean-going vessels plying the river, some bringing fossil fuels as well as gypsum and molasses up the river. Others may be seen carrying scrap metals, grains, and cement downriver to ports all around the world. Before the advent of refrigeration, harvesting ice along the river was an important industry. Large blocks were cut with saws and stored in sawdust in large ice houses. Eventually, the ice was shipped downriver to the New York metropolitan area. Both the East Shore and West Shores of the Hudson River have railroad facilities. The East Shore has high-speed Amtrak trains from New York City to Albany, Montreal, Toronto, and Chicago. In addition, the East Shore has a commuter railroad, Metro North, between metropolitan New York and the northern terminus at Poughkeepsie. There are no passenger services on the west shore. However, there's often a frequency of 30 freight trains or more every day. Lighthouses once served as important navigational beacons for night navigation on the Hudson. 7 lights that were once manned by lighthouse keepers still remain and are being restored by a variety of volunteer agencies. The Esopus Meadows Lighthouse, located on a sharp curve just south of Port Ewan, is the only remaining lighthouse made of wood. Just north of the Esopus Meadows Light is the Rondout Lighthouse, located at the mouth of the Rondout Creek. About 10 miles north of the Kingston Light is the Saugerties Lighthouse, located at the mouth of the Esopus Creek, and the most northerly lighthouse is the Hudson Athens Lighthouse, located on another sharp bend in the river. These lights not only marked hazards, but they also delineated the channel. Above Kingston, the Corps of Engineers maintains the 32-foot deep channel for ocean-going vessels all the way to Albany. The buoys which mark the channel are maintained by the United States Coast Guard. The Coast Guard also keeps the channel free of ice during the cold winter months. Although the history of the river that flows 2 ways began tens of thousands of years ago when the glaciers gouged out the channel, its history continues in a process that is forever ongoing. At one time, the river presented an avenue for exploration, a waterway for commerce, travel, and recreation. During the 19th and 20th centuries, the work of civilization brought the river to high levels of pollution. But the transforming powers of science and technology have cleaned up the river over the past 30 years. Today, we take great pride in the river's magnificence, enjoying its breathtaking beauty. Many, and rightfully so, consider the Hudson River as one of the splendid jewels of the United States.